When in Byron Bay on New Year's Eve last year, I was at a waterfall and the local news crew happened to come over and I was like, oh, here we go, I'll get Voxy. And I talked to them for like 3 minutes and the best thing I said, which they used on the news, was, oh, it's coming down like heaps. I was just like, after having done a million Voxies in the past where the person just has no idea what they're doing, and then I got the chance and I just absolutely That's hilarious though, because I put it on the news and my girlfriend still says like, oh yeah, it's coming down like heaps.
Welcome to Legends with Bevo, thanks to Anytime Fitness Glenelg.
Callum MacPherson, the host of Youngblood Men's Health Matters and former Channel 7 news reporter. Great to have you on the show, mate. What an absolute privilege.
It's an honour to be here, Bevo. Thanks for having me on, man.
Let's talk about your own journey, Cal, because you started off at Channel 7 in Adelaide, but before that you're in Townsville. You spent a bit of time in Port Lincoln and also in Port Pirie as well. And then you made the big decision to want to start your own podcast. I guess talk to us through your journey and some of the interesting things that you got up to when you're, in those regional towns and also with Channel 7 in Adelaide. And then I guess what made you decide to make that big call to go into podcasting? Yeah.
So I did journalism at uni, and that whole time I was at uni, I volunteered at Fresh 92.7, the radio station. So I used to read the news a couple mornings a week there, and got the opportunity while I was there to start doing my own stories as well. So just anything you wanted to do on Adelaide. Happening in Adelaide, and that was called Wavelength, and I really loved that. That was the first time that I realised that I wanted to tell stories, and that's what I'm really interested in. I was a kid who was good at English at school. Both my parents are English teachers, didn't want to be a teacher. So I've seen that a lot, actually. There's a lot of journalists that have parents who are teachers and then decide to use those skills for some other reason, but I think
I can vouch for that. Both my parents were teachers too.
There's a lot of that. I was working at the radio station, and that sort of started to get me really interested in telling those stories. But I pretty much went my whole way through my degree without being set on being a TV reporter or going and getting into news. It's just one of those things that sort of happened. I think you can only ever take the step in front of you. And you never know what something's going to lead to. So doing that work at Fresh, I ended up getting an internship week at Port Pirie, went there, and then at the end of that week, the Port Lincoln journalist quit. So I ended up going, and before I knew it, I'd moved to Port Lincoln, moved out of home for the first time at 22, moved town, started my first job, and I was living in a shack on a hill with no utilities after having a fairly comfortable life, getting cooked for by mum for all that time. So that was a bit of a wake up call. But yeah, you really grow by being thrust into those sorts of situations where it's sort of sink or swim. And if you leave home or go interstate or somewhere else, you don't really want to come back with your tail between your legs, sort of saying that you couldn't make it happen. So I had to find out a lot about myself and a lot about the job as well, because they kind of get you when you have no idea just how much you don't know and just how much work that job's going to be, but you don't really have anything to weigh it up against. So you don't know until you start, and then later on you look back and realize, like, man, I was doing serious work back then. So I was a video journalist in Port Lincoln, so that meant that I was the cameraman, the producer, the reporter, the editor, and I had to come up with 2 stories a day, which in a town of 15,000 people wasn't that easy sometimes. And it's a fishing town, so I pretty much, when I couldn't think of something, I'd say, all right, when was the last time I did a tuna story? Or when was the last time I did a kingfish story, or like an oyster story? So I'd just like shuffle through those a lot of the time. But no matter what, you had to come up with something. And it was just me. Like, I had no colleagues, and you have to fill the bulletin and come up with that content every day. So there was a lot of pressure there to just make stuff happen, which was really tough, but it also is good for what it teaches you and transferable skills going forward, that, it's not like, oh, well, didn't work out today, we'll just do it tomorrow. It's like, you have to do it or the world's going to end, is sort of how it felt a lot of the time. I was there for about 9 months in Port Lincoln, and then I got a job in Townsville for 7 Queensland, Townsville. So I was there for a year and a half, and that was better because it was a team, but there was only about 4 or 5 of us. probably 6 or 7, including cameramen. But we had like 1 camera a day, had to fill the half-hour news bulletin, 3 news reporters who were all under 25, including the boss of the newsroom, and a sport reporter who was a bit older. And that was awesome. Like I really got a heap amount out of being there, but it was pretty tough as well. It's pretty bizarre living in North Queensland compared to Adelaide. It felt like being on the set of Crocodile Dundee, but everyone else was like oblivious or thought that was normal. And it sort of looks like you're in the Cretaceous period of dinosaurs as well when you're there. So it's pretty interesting. And the humidity's crazy. It's like 90% humidity every day. So I'd be ironing my shirt with my suit pants on, and by the time I'd finished, I would have sweated through my pants. So when I got there in February when it was at its hottest, and sort of experienced that straight away, and thought like, yeah, it's going to be a bit of a tough stint in that regard. And everyone's obviously walking around in tank tops and thongs and stuff, and you still have to get around in a suit looking
that's rough.
So that was pretty brutal. But yeah, very interesting place. I think the thing that I really cherished about that was being fortunate to be there at a time where there was lots of other really good people. So it was a really tough situation, difficult job. But I think wherever you are, if you've got that sense of community and you're lucky enough to meet good people, work with good people, it really like makes the experience. And then you sort of look back fondly on how good it was and kind of remember the times that you don't remember the times that were so tough. But yeah, got a huge amount of that experience as well. So those few years happened pretty fast, and I had to learn and think on my feet and make a lot of stuff happen. And and then eventually came back to Adelaide after that.
Yeah, and then you sort of did that role for a while, and we've spoken about this a number of times off air, but you sort of got to a stage where you just couldn't deal with the pressure and going to see car crashes and fires and stabbings and all that sort of thing. So you decided to start your own podcast. And that's a big call though. You've gone through all these tough years of in the country and being isolated to being a dream job, and then decide to be a podcaster. Big call, Cow.
Yeah. Well, I think when you first start out in your career, you can't know how you feel about doing a job until you start doing it. So, and a big part of it initially is you're just trying to prove to yourself and others that you can do it. And then after a long enough time, when you know you can, you start to ask yourself, whether you want to or not, or whether you believe in what it is. And the fact is that with commercial news, it's totally geared towards focusing on the negative, just because that's what gets views and that's what people want to watch a lot of the time, because of the way we're wired as human beings. We're meant to look out for threats. So yeah, every day it's pretty much go and find the most negative thing that's happening wherever you live and focus on it really hard. And often there'll be people there, obviously, who are distressed, whether someone's been assaulted or a house has burned down or there's been an accident. You never, like the cops, you're never really going anywhere nice a lot of the time. And you're sort of kind of like emergency services, although nowhere near as great as the work that they do, and also having to be first responders, it's not to that level, but you do sort of become desensitized to it and sort of block it out because you've got to go and do that job every day. But you're in sort of semi-dangerous situations a lot of the time, and you're having to push people and get stuff out of people who might be distressed or might be having the worst day of their life. And you can still do the job with compassion and integrity, which a lot of people do. But yeah, it's very intense, and it definitely does rub off on you over time. And I noticed that it really started to put me on edge in the rest of my life. And you spend all day wherever the worst thing is that happened, and you start to think that that's actually normal, or that's happening all around you, and it's really not. But obviously, you're getting sent out to that all the time. So, and I felt like eventually, after 4 years of doing it, and mostly doing overnight crime for the 2 years that I was in Adelaide, which was getting up early in the morning, going to whoever got stabbed, finding the people who saw it or knew about it, and then trying to drum a story up out of it. After doing that for so long, I just felt like it was starting to change me a bit as a person. I'm becoming a bit jaded in the way that I viewed the world and looked at people, and felt like I was becoming a lot more negative as well. I think that's sort of inevitable if you become whatever your environment is to an extent. And I didn't feel like that was me. Sort of was bringing me down a bit. So I wanted to find a way to tell stories because I love telling stories and talking to people. But I wanted to tell stories, mostly positive stories and stories that have a different kind of an impact. And then it was the tragedy of my friend passing away that spurred me to start up the podcast. And then that was happening in the background while I was still working for the best part of a year. But and then when COVID happened, I actually decided to give the news away and actually went on Centrelink for a few months with no job, and was still at this time paying a huge amount of my money to be able to keep the podcast going because, as you know, Bevo, it's not
cheap.
It's not cheap. So I was paying for that and no sort of job lined up, but just really love doing the podcast and running Young Blood, and felt like something was going to come of it, and just wanted to fully commit to it. Took that jump with some help from family and friends, and girlfriend who's very supportive. And it was a few uncomfortable months there of saying, no one's paying for this podcast and you don't have a job. What are you going to do? And me not really knowing, but I suppose that's when you find out if you're really passionate or not. And as you certainly have, I think it's one thing to say I'm passionate about something, I want to do something, but it's another thing when you're having to invest a lot of your money and it's starting to become quite uncomfortable, and it would be so much easier to give it away, and the initial motivation's worn off. I think that's when most people quit, if not before, but I wasn't going to do that because it means enough to me. So from there, ended up getting some sponsors for the podcast, which is really good, and it's a consistent battle to keep that going, and getting more and more people to support it and hear it and see the benefit in it and want to be part of it is really important and makes a massive difference in that respect. And then I now work at SAMRI, the SA Health and Medical Research Institute, as one of their storytellers. So basically telling those positive stories about medical breakthroughs and speaking to researchers and getting those kinds of yarns out into the public, which I love doing. So
wonderful.
It ended up being the best decision I could have made. But taking those sort of leaps of faith, they're called leaps of faith for a reason, because you got to have faith, and it's a bit scary.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that, Cal, and absolutely well done to you. And you spoke about it before. You do have to have a passion for it. And I've spent thousands of dollars on mine, and my friends have gone, is this really worth it? When are you going to start making dollars? And I'm lucky like you to have a really supportive, or now wife, not girlfriend. But it's if I didn't have her to support me and stuff like that, then I don't know, I probably wouldn't be able to do it, because there was times there where I was also on Centrelink and not working and finding it so hard to find work, and end up having to do nude modelling and stuff to pay the bills. You got to pay the bill somehow.
I never want to see that.
You got to pay the bill somehow. So,
but you are that passionate though. I mean, you live and breathe this, and you really love it. And I think that
exactly same as you.
Once you realise that, if you're fortunate enough to find whatever that thing is and be able to be in a position to make it happen, it almost feels like you don't have a choice. Like you really almost couldn't live with yourself if you didn't find a way to do it.
Yeah,
and I'm probably young and naive, but that's sort of how it's felt to me.
No, that's great. Yeah. And well done for taking that massive plunge, but it's all paying dividends now. Let's talk about your year, because you've had some incredible success this year in terms of, nominations for awards, and you're killing it. You're one of the best podcasters with men's health around Australia and the world. Tell us more about it.
Gosh, that sounds like a good rap.
It is though. It's telling the truth.
Yeah, so I was really honoured to win silver for Best Wellbeing Podcast at the Australian Podcast Awards, which was a real thrill, because I suppose, you don't do it for the accolades and stuff, but it does play a role in sort of validating that what you're doing is good quality and is getting out there and helping people. So that was a real thrill to win that. When you're the one trying to push to get whatever your thing is out, and you don't have a whole team of people to help you with it, you've just got to stay on it and understand that this stuff, like anything worth having, just doesn't happen overnight. And I think to take podcasting, for example, people like to talk about monetizing or whatever really early on, or how you're going to make money off it. And I think if you have that attitude, you're never going to make it, because the sheer amount of work that it takes to put these episodes together, from the preparation to recording them to then editing them and pushing them out there, could become like a full-time job. And if you don't do it for the right reasons, like anything, you don't really love it, you're just not going to go the distance, and you're not going to stay in the game long enough for it to go anywhere. I think you have to be prepared to sort of wait three to 5 years to see if what you're doing is any good. But yeah, getting the nominations and the awards was cool, because it's sort of evidence that it's not just your mum saying that it's good. Yeah.
Yeah. No, well said. Everywhere, just everyone knows about Cal and your story. Tell us all about it for those people that haven't heard of it before.
Oh, that's very kind of you. So Young Blood is basically just about opening up conversations around young men's mental health. So pretty much the show is me speaking to young men sort of under that 35. You might not quite make the bracket from around Australia who've just been through various walks of life and gone on all kinds of different journeys. And the point is basically to redefine what it is to be a man in the modern day, and what it is to have that masculinity about yourself, and actually change things from men don't talk, men don't show their emotions. We all keep it inside and close ourselves down, to actually it's cool to open up with each other and be honest. And that if we do that, we actually become much more effective partners, brothers, sons, friends, fathers. And that's really what it's all about, is showing other blokes that, yeah, there's so many people out there just like you going through similar stuff, and you got no reason to feel ashamed because you're not alone. So yeah, that's really what it's all about. And it started end of last year, so September 2019. And that was motivated by losing a mate to suicide earlier in that year, and really feeling firsthand the impact of what that does to a community around somebody, and going through that pain myself, and then really understanding that there's just so many people going through something very similar, and just about all of us will be touched by suicide and certainly mental ill health at some point in our life. So as a storyteller by trade, I sort of started to think about what I could do with my skills to spark more of those conversations and have more of those chats, because it was clear to me that my friend felt like he couldn't fully open up. He couldn't share with me and others how he was really feeling, and by isolating himself and not feeling like he could share the load, that sort of led to disaster. So it's all about having that platform for men to feel comfortable to try and start to change this idea that we can't open up and be real with each other.
Yeah, and it's so important, especially in this COVID world we live in this year as well, Cal. And obviously condolences about your friend. It's a terrible situation, but it's great that you're doing such good things now in his honour. Did you ever sort of notice certain things that he was doing to make you feel as though he was suicidal and that he had mental health issues?
No. Obviously, hindsight is a hell of a thing, and that's what happens with these sorts of tragic situations, is people can drive themselves crazy going back over and over in their minds what they should have said or what they could have done or what they didn't notice. With my friend, I did notice that he was struggling, but never to the extent that he would have done what he did, nowhere near. So I think that's the scariest thing about suicide and mental health issues, is that people are so good at hiding it, and it so often can be someone who seems like they've got it all sorted out on paper. It's not the typical, here's a no-hoper who's got no chance in life and is given up. It can be the person who's got a great job, got an amazing attitude, got great family and friends, and yet on the inside they can be just hiding this sort of monster, and be so good at making sure no one else sees that. So I think that's why it's so crucial that we check in on every single one of our mates and people that we love in our life. It doesn't matter how good you think they're doing or what it looks like on social media. Everyone is on that continuum of mental health, and we all need to make sure that we're checking in and looking after ourselves and each other all the time.
Absolutely well said. And obviously this year with the COVID situation, we're seeing people having such terrible times with their mental health and people losing their jobs left, right and centre. It's just, and obviously people not being able to see their families. So it's a worse situation we've seen in a long time. Yeah. What sort of advice do you have for people, Cal, that are going through some tough times and doing it, tough with whether it be losing jobs or whether it be, not being able to see friends and family and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I guess people are going through such a broad spectrum of challenges this year, and going through the whole COVID situation isn't the same from one person to the next. So I guess subjectively, it's pretty hard to give advice necessarily, but what I would say and what I do think is really important, and that something that we can all contribute to, is just kindness. I think we can all be a bit kinder to each other. And I hope that that's something that comes out of this, that we start to treat our fellow man with a bit more kindness and just have compassion for what we're all going through, and understanding that you never know what someone else's situation is. And I think that COVID's really brought that to or highlighted that, because people know that everyone's going through something, everyone's struggling. And I think that means we need to be able to really support each other and have more compassion and not let ourselves get in the way and thinking we're the only ones who are important, and shoving people out of the way to get your Christmas shopping and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think kindness is a big one that we can all practice, and then I think for me, just keeping yourself mentally, physically healthy, doing the right things, making sure that you are connecting with people, reaching out, having those conversations, because that sense of community and connection and feeling like you're not alone is just like so pivotal for all of us. So don't care who you are, we all have to make sure that we're maintaining those relationships. So I think you have to put the effort into it yourself, and then you have to get it back as well. So I would overall though, kindness for others and kindness for yourself.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, the kindness thing, because happy to admit, Cal, I had a pretty tough time in high school, and obviously I've turned my life around now, and it's a positive situation. But I just feel for people now that are going through tough times at school, and then you've got cyberbullying as well to go with it. I just can't imagine how difficult it must be for those sort of people in high school that are dealing with those double doses. Like, it was bad enough having to deal with bullying in high school, skinny little kid, squeaky voice. It was so difficult, but I had a supportive family, but there's other people out there that don't have that same kind of thing. And thankfully I didn't have to worry about social media. Like they're going through tough times at school. Can't get away from it. Exactly. Yeah. They're going home, then they're having to deal with it on social media. You've got all these trolls and these other idiots as well. It's just, so yeah, what sort of advice do you sort of give for those sort of people?
There's just heaps for young people to navigate these days. And I think, we've got to have sympathy for this world that they're being brought up in. And I was fortunate enough to have pretty much got through my teenage years before social media really became like a mainstay in society. I was sort of getting towards year 11, 12 when people sort of had Facebook, but it wasn't like you're 9 years old and you got Snapchat and you're on Instagram worried about how you look as an 11-year-old girl or boy. So young people these days are just for the first time in human history facing something so unprecedented. In that regard, I do some work with schools, with middle school boys, just about healthy relationships and what they're doing online and masculinity and those sorts of things. I think although technology's changed a lot in terms of the pressure on young people and the fact that they just don't get a break from it, the things that they need and we all need are still the same, which is that sense of belonging and friendship, and they can still get that, but it's just difficult sometimes to get away from it and get a break. So I think just closing down, getting off it when you can is important.
It's okay to be honest about how you feel with your feelings, and if you're getting picked on, talk to your friends, talk to your family, say this is not right. So that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Well,
Especially
that's
in
it. Yeah,
2020.
and we want to get to. Well, I focus on young men in particular, but I suppose young people as a whole, we want to get to them at an early age and try to ingrain in them that, you should be speaking about how you're really feeling and sharing that and not being ashamed of that, as soon as you're starting out in your young life, and adopt that as a habit as you go into later adult life. Because really we're talking about preventative health strategies, and at the moment we see a lot of funding and effort at the other end of the scale, in the clinical side of things. But that preventative health, if we can get better at educating our young people from a really young age and making them feel comfortable with themselves, and really putting a huge amount of resources and effort into changing that mindset and mentality from a young age, then we're going to avoid a lot of problems further down the line. Those getting to kids when they're in their early teenage years is crucial to setting them up to have healthy lives.
That's why it's so important with what you're doing with school. So keep up the great work with that.
Yeah,
and there's been some amazing guests in the last couple of years, Cal, but perhaps tell us a few of your most inspirational guests and why.
Yeah, so I think it's one thing to have people with profile on who are might have some sort of celebrity status, and they can have great stories to tell as well. But a big focus for young blood that I've found is just that there's so many, you'd call them average Joes in our community with unbelievable stories to tell that need to be told. And that's really what Young Blood is as a platform, is telling those stories that wouldn't get light of day a lot of times otherwise. And the power of having just, a bloke just like yourself talk about what they've been through and make you really feel that and hear where they're coming from and see the similarities in yourself, is that, it's not some celebrity that lives this whole other life to you. It's just another guy, and here he is telling it like it is and being real. And I think that really inspires people to engage with their own health and plants the seed in their mind that they need to perhaps look at where they're at and certainly not feel ashamed at all. So I really love telling those stories of just average everyday blokes who've done incredible things. And look, some of them have been people who've been to war, CFS firefighters, and then just people who've overcome and continue to overcome their own battles with depression and having had a history of suicidality. I had a amazing African refugee on the show who had been through more at the age of 21 than most would be in a few lifetimes. It constantly just have jaw-dropping moments, hearing men really open up and talk about what they've been through and what they've seen and who they really are. And I think you can hear the authenticity in those conversations, and I'm constantly inspired by those people. And I think that's a huge part of why I love doing it, because it just makes you realize sort of how fortunate you are and how precious life is and what opportunities you have, and just sort of how inspiring plenty of people are in your close circle and out from there. So yeah, it's hard to nail down to any sort of one episode.
No, you've answered it well. I think it is very hard. And it's same as people ask me as well, what's been some of my favorite interviews, and it's very hard because so many inspirational people out there, and a bit like yours, I just love hearing people's stories, and everyone has a story to tell. And like you mentioned, someone who's not necessarily a celebrity almost has a better story because of what they've been through and things they've overcome and stuff like that. So it's wonderful. And what's in mind for 2021? What's what do you want to do in 2021, Kia?
Yeah, so I run my own business now, which is Young Blood Media. So the podcast is part of that, and then also do some filmmaking. So we make short films with Rory's the cameraman, the podcast producer. So really making use of him. So do that, and then working at Samurai as well. But I suppose with the podcast, it's the same as you. So you always just want to grow it. You always want more people to hear the message of it. Not because you want to be the biggest thing since Ben-Hur, but just because you believe in what you're putting out. And I believe in this message, and that now's the time that we have to have these voices out there, and we have to come together, people who have these kinds of platforms, and to really turn the tide and make that generational change where, you know, our sons and their sons and daughters are being brought up in a world where it's fine for young people to express themselves, and it's wholly encouraged. And I think we will get there, and we are getting there, but it's not something that happens overnight at all. And we really have to work at it. And I think for me, there's no greater cause that I'd like to contribute to than that, because it truly has meaning to me. And I think that's all you can ask as someone who's a content creator or anyone working, is to do some work that you believe in. And I guess that's been the big change for me. So yeah, in 2021, keep doing what I've done so far that's got it to this point, which is, you know, keep it simple. Just keep making content. Just keep putting out stories. Keep meeting people. Keep making connections, and yeah, keep having those conversations and keep talking. I think it's one thing to have like lofty goals or look too far off into the distance, but that can maybe overcomplicate things. And sometimes you just got to put one foot in front of the other and look at what you did to get to where you are, and yeah, keep it simple. Just do the next episode, and you know, shake the next hand, and yeah, hopefully help whoever the next person is, and the rest of it will sort of take care of itself.
Yeah, it's wonderful what you're doing. And then for those people out there that are listening today or watching Indeed Cow, how can they follow your podcast, Young Blood? Yep,
so Young Blood Men's Health Matters on Facebook. We post all our episodes on there, and also youngbloodmedia.com.au is our website. Got YouTube, Young Blood Media, and then Instagram, Young Blood Men's Health Matters, if you can follow on those platforms. And yeah, put episodes out sort of every 10 days or so. And try to speak to just the widest variety of people as possible, so that there's something for everyone. Because I think that's also key when we're talking about men's health and mental health in our society. It's got to involve every aspect of it. We're all in this together. So try to make sure that there's something for everyone, so that we understand that, yeah, we're not alone.
I think there should be an old blood media as well for old farts like myself, well, like your 40 to 60 year olds.
Yeah. Well, I think there's probably a market for that as well. But I'm not old or wise enough yet to be able to satisfy that market. So I'll leave that to you.
No, all jokes aside, thank you so much. Love all your work, Callum, and you know, it's been really interesting hearing and seeing your journey so far these last couple of years. And thanks for everything you've been doing to help me out as well with my podcast, Legends with Bevo, and look forward to keeping in touch.
Yeah, thanks, Bevo. It's a real honour to come on and be interviewed. It's funny being interviewed when you're usually the interviewer. But yeah, it's really humbling that you're interested to chat to me, and hats off to you for your persistence and not giving up with this, because yeah, it takes a lot of guts to keep it going, but I'm sure that you will, because you got that twinkle in your eye.
Thank you. You're definitely a legend in my eye, mate. So thanks again.
PodBooth. Sounds so good.